He addressed the gathered multitude, his voice clear and strong. Shadowcrest declares a new unity tonight, not with another pack, but within our own. He looked at me, his love shining openly for all to see. We declare the unity of heart and crown, of strategy and strength. I, Radiant Vale, Alpha of Shadowcrest, pledge my life and loyalty to Alara Vance, our Arden, my partner and my chosen future. Then it was my turn. I looked at the sea of faces, at my pack beaming with pride, at the world that had once rejected me. And I, Alara Vance, pledged my heart, my mind, and my loyalty to Radiant Vale, my Alpha, my partner, and my chosen future. Together, we build not just a pack, but a legacy of choice, of resilience, and of love. The cheer that rose from the Shadowcrest contingent was thunderous, but more surprisingly, it was echoed by many other packs. They cheered for the story, for the redemption, for the visible, tangible proof that happiness could be forged from the broken pieces of a cruel fate. As we stood there, bathed in approval and moonlight, I caught one last glimpse of Kieran. He stood with his council, apart. He watched us, and on his face was no anger, no regret for me, but perhaps a flicker of regret for the path he had chosen. He saw the partnership, the respect, the love that shone between us, a love he had spurned for the cold comfort of a throne. He turned and melted into the shadows of his own making, a silent footnote in our bright story. The festival ended. We returned to our mountains, but everything was different. The fortress was no longer just my home. It was ours. The future was no longer a hope. It was a promise, spoken under twin moons. A year passed in the gentle, relentless rhythm of a mountain stream, always moving, always shaping, always clear. The peace treaty with the North held strong. Reparations were paid, the borders were quiet, and the only silver we saw from that direction was the occasional trade caravan, conducted with brisk, formal efficiency. Kieran Thorne ruled his kingdom, but the stories said he ruled it alone, a colder, quieter king, the lesson of his obsession etched into his reign. In Shadowcrest, life bloomed. My official title remained Arden, but my role evolved seamlessly. I was Radiant's partner in every sense. We governed together. In the mornings, we would walk the walls not just as an inspection, but as a quiet time to talk, to plan, to simply be. The warriors and the children alike would wave, calling Alpha, Arden, with equal affection. One bright autumn morning, we stood at the Falcon's Perch, the place where my flight had ended and my true strength had been recognized. The view was breathtaking, the valley below a riot of gold and crimson. "It's strange," I said, leaning into his side. His arm came around me, warm and sure. I used to look at views like this from a dirty window in the city and feel so small. Now I look at this and feel vast, like I'm part of it all. "You are," he murmured, pressing a kiss to my temple. "You are the heart of it." The pack had flourished. New families were started. The forges now made tools as often as weapons. We had opened a formal school, combining combat training with history, strategy, and even arts. The first teacher had been Lyra, her sternness perfect for imparting discipline, but I often taught the strategy classes. The children, especially the young girls, would listen with wide eyes to the story of the waitress who became the Arden, not as a fairy tale, but as a lesson in tactics and resilience. Our love was the steady foundation of it all. It was in the shared smile over a stubborn elder's complaint, in the quiet support during a difficult decision, in the warmth of his hand in mine as we fell asleep each night. It was a conscious, daily choice to love and respect each other, and that made it unbreakable. On the anniversary of my arrival at Shadowcrest, not the night of the gala, but the day Radiant brought me home, the pack threw a celebration. It was not a mating ceremony, for we needed no ritual to confirm what we already were. It was a festival of found family. The great hall was decked with autumn leaves and glowing lanterns. There was music, dancing, and tables groaning with food from our own lands. After the feasting, Radiant stood and raised a cup. "A year ago," he said, his voice warm and carrying, "a wounded soul was brought to our gates. We offered shelter. What we received in return was far greater. We received a strategist who saved our home, a protector who fights for our weakest, a heart that reminds us every day that strength is not in where you come from, but in who you choose to become. He turned to me, his eyes shining. To Alara, our Arden, my love, our family. The toast echoed through the hall. To Alara, to family. Tears of joy stung my eyes as I stood. To Shadowcrest, to the pack that saw a person when the world saw a problem, to the home that is built not on blood, but on loyalty, and to the man, I looked at Rydian, who taught me that the most powerful bond is not the one you're given, but the one you choose to build every single day. Later, under a sky dusted with a million stars, we walked in the quiet courtyard. The sounds of the celebration were a happy hum inside. Happy, I said, the word a complete sentence. Content, he agreed, squeezing my hand. It's a better feeling than I ever imagined. What's next? I asked, not with anxiety, but with eager curiosity. Next? He smiled, looking up at the stars, then back at me, his gaze filled with a future of infinite possibility. Next, we continue. We build the school library. We negotiate the new trade route with the Coastal Pack. We watch our people grow and thrive. We grow old together on this mountain, surrounded by the family we've made. He brought my hand to his lips. Next is a lifetime of quiet mornings and challenging days and peaceful nights. Next is our legacy. And I knew he was right. The story of the rejected mate was over. It was a closed chapter, a lesson learned by a foolish king and the transformative fire for a girl who rose from its ashes. The story that continued was ours, the story of Alara and Rydian, of the Ghost King and the hearts of the fortress. It was a story of choice over chance, of love over legacy, of a future written not by fate in the stars, but by two hands clasped together, building something beautiful and enduring, one chosen day at a time. Under the watchful mountains and the endless stars, I knew this was it. This was the happy ending, and it was only the beginning. And then, across the field, I saw the Silvermane contingent. Kieran sat atop his horse, flanked by his council. He saw me. Our eyes met across the bustling distance. There was no anger, no longing, just the solemn acceptance of a sworn oath. He looked at me, at my place beside Rydian, at the Shadowcrest banner flying proudly. He saw the woman who was once his nothing, now a cornerstone of a rival kingdom. He gave the same faint, acknowledging nod as he had in the Great Hall, then turned his attention to his own people. The past was a closed book. The weight was gone. Rydian leaned closer, his voice for my ears only. Welcome to the world, Arden. I smiled, my heart light and full. I was Elara Vance. I was home. And my story, our story, was just entering its brightest chapter. The Festival of the Twin Moons was a living tapestry, woven from laughter, music, and the rich mingling scents of a dozen packs. For the first time, Shadowcrest did not linger on the fringes. We were ushered to a place of honor near the great central fire, our banners flying alongside those of the oldest, most established packs. The respect was tangible, earned not by ancient blood, but by recent courage and honorable peace. I moved through the festival as Elara Vance, Arden of Shadowcrest. I participated in the strategic games, a complex match played with stones on a carved board representing terrain. I found myself across from Elder Marin of the Silvermane. She played a ruthless, traditional game. I played the terrain, sacrificing stones to control key passes, much as I had in the real mountains. I won. Her smile as she conceded was one of genuine, if grudging, respect. The heart of the fortress, indeed, she said, her voice carrying. The title, spoken aloud by a Silvermane elder, cemented it in the public eye. Rydian competed in the displays of strength and skill, not to dominate, but to participate. He was formidable, but he also laughed when a young wolf from an eastern pack managed to unbalance him in a wrestling match. The sight of the Ghost King, dusty and grinning, was a revelation to many. He was not a monster from the shadows, but a leader secure enough to enjoy his people's joy. We were a team. During the pack alliance discussions, he would handle the broad strokes of diplomacy, and I would work out the logistical details with the other pack stewards. We moved in sync, a silent communication flowing between us. A glance, a slight nod, the brush of a sleeve. It was a language more intimate than any we had ever spoken aloud. One evening, as twin moons rose, silver and gold, hanging low in the sky, a traditional dance began. It was a complex, weaving dance that told the story of the first shifters under the twin moons. Partners were chosen. Rydian stood before me, the firelight dancing in his amber eyes. He said nothing, only offered his hand. It was not a command from an alpha. It was a question from a man. I placed my hand in his. The dance was all about connection and trust, shifting steps, mirroring steps, moving as one unit through the intricate pattern. As we danced, the world narrowed to the pressure of his hands on my back, the sure guidance of his steps, the intensity of his gaze that never left mine. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. In the space between the steps, in the shared breath, in the silent acknowledgement of everything we had overcome together, something final and beautiful clicked into place. The music swelled to a finish. We stood close, breathless, the world rushing back in, the applause, the smells, the moonlight. In his eyes, I saw my own wonder reflected, and something more. A love that had been patiently built, stone by stone, in the forge of shared trials. It was not the dizzying, fate-driven lightning of the mate bond. It was the steady, warming glow of a hearth fire, built and tended with care. It was stronger. It was real. Later, we walked away from the noise, following a path that led to a quiet grove sacred to the festival. The sounds of celebration were a soft murmur behind us. The air was cool and sweet with night-blooming flowers. "Ilara," Rydian began, his voice uncharacteristically hesitant. He stopped walking, turning to face me. The twin moons lit his profile. He said nothing, only offered his hand. It was not a command from an alpha. It was a question from a man. I placed my hand in his. The dance was all about connection and trust, shifting steps, mirroring steps, moving as one unit through the intricate pattern. As we danced, the world narrowed to the pressure of his hands on my back, the sure guidance of his steps, the intensity of his gaze that never left mine. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. In the space between the steps, in the shared breath, in the silent acknowledgement of everything we had overcome together, something final and beautiful clicked into place. The music swelled to a finish. We stood close, breathless, the world rushing back in, the applause, the smells, the moonlight. In his eyes, I saw my own wonder reflected, and something more. A love that had been patiently built, stone by stone, in the forge of shared trials. It was not the dizzying, fate-driven lightning of the mate bond. It was the steady, warming glow of a hearth fire, built and tended with care. It was stronger. It was real. Later, we walked away from the noise, following a path that led to a quiet grove sacred to the festival. The sounds of celebration were a soft murmur behind us. The air was cool and sweet with night-blooming flowers. "Ilara," Rydian began, his voice uncharacteristically hesitant. He stopped walking, turning to face me. The twin moons lit his profile. He said nothing, only offered his hand. It was not a command from an alpha. It was a question from a man. I placed my hand in his. The dance was all about connection and trust, shifting steps, mirroring steps, moving as one unit through the intricate pattern. As we danced, the world narrowed to the pressure of his hands on my back, the sure guidance of his steps, the intensity of his gaze that never left mine. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. In the space between the steps, in the shared breath, in the silent acknowledgement of everything we had overcome together, something final and beautiful clicked into place. The music swelled to a finish. We stood close, breathless, the world rushing back in, the applause, the smells, the moonlight. In his eyes, I saw my own wonder reflected, and something more. A love that had been patiently built, stone by stone, in the forge of shared trials. It was not the dizzying, fate-driven lightning of the mate bond. It was the steady, warming glow of a hearth fire, built and tended with care. It was stronger. It was real. Later, we walked away from the noise, following a path that led to a quiet grove sacred to the festival. The sounds of celebration were a soft murmur behind us. The air was cool and sweet with night-blooming flowers. "Ilara," Rydian began, his voice uncharacteristically hesitant. He stopped walking, turning to face me. The twin moons lit his profile. He said nothing, only offered his hand. It was not a command from an alpha. It was a question from a man. I placed my hand in his. The dance was all about connection and trust, shifting steps, mirroring steps, moving as one unit through the intricate pattern. As we danced, the world narrowed to the pressure of his hand on my back, the sure guidance of his steps, the intensity of his gaze that never left mine. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. In the space between the steps, in the shared breath, in the silent acknowledgement of everything we had overcome together, something final and beautiful clicked into place. The music swelled to a finish. We stood close, breathless, the world rushing back in, the applause, the smells, the moonlight. In his eyes, I saw my own wonder reflected, and something more, a love that had been patiently built, stone by stone, in the forge of shared trials. It was not the dizzying, fate-driven lightning of the mate bond. It was the steady, warming glow of a hearth fire, built and tended with care. It was stronger. It was real. Later, we walked away from the noise, following a path that led to a quiet grove sacred to the festival. The sounds of celebration were a soft murmur behind us. The air was cool and sweet with night-blooming flowers. "Ilara," Rydian began, his voice uncharacteristically hesitant. He stopped walking, turning to face me. The twin moons lit his profile. He said nothing, only offered his hand. It was not a command from an alpha. It was a question from a man. I placed my hand in his. The dance was all about connection and trust, shifting steps, mirroring steps, moving as one unit through the intricate pattern. As we danced, the world narrowed to the pressure of his hands on my back, the sure guidance. Then he turned and, flanked by his elders, was led from the hall to begin the journey back to his kingdom, a king who would forever rule under the shadow of his own oath and his council's diminished trust. As the doors closed, the held breath of Shadowcrest was released. Lyra began discussing reparations with the remaining elders. The business of peace continued. Rydian stood and walked to the window. I joined him. We watched the Silvermane delegation, a somber procession, wind their way down the mountain path. "It's over," I whispered. "This chapter is," he said. He turned to face me, the morning sun glinting in his amber eyes. "Your first act as Arden has secured a generation of peace. How does it feel?" I looked out at the fortress, waking to a new day, at the pack moving with a lightness that hadn't been there for months. I felt the solidity of the stone beneath my feet, the respect in the hall behind me, the quiet, steady presence of the man beside me. "It feels," I said, a true, deep smile finally breaking through, like a beginning. Peace, I discovered, was not the absence of noise, but the presence of a different kind of music. The rhythm of Shadowcrest changed from the urgent drumbeat of defense to the steady, productive hum of community. My life transformed with it. As the newly recognized Arden, my days were full, but with purpose, not fear. Mornings were still for training, but now I often led the drills for the younger warriors or those specializing in reconnaissance. My understanding of terrain and unconventional tactics, honed during my own survival and the night of the chase, made me an effective, if unorthodox, instructor. Afternoons were spent with Lyra, learning the intricate logistics of running a pack, supply lines, seasonal migrations of game, diplomacy with smaller border packs, the allocation of resources. It was complex, often tedious, and utterly fascinating. I was no longer just living in the fortress, I was helping its heart beat. My evenings were often in the library with Rydian. We had fallen into a comfortable routine. He would work on ledgers or correspondence. I would study old treaties or military histories. We discussed everything: the philosophy of leadership, the ethics of power, the best way to repair the Eastern Wall. The easy silence between us was a balm. The ghost of the mate bond with Kieran had finally faded, leaving not emptiness, but space. space I was filling with my own accomplishments, my own identity. One such evening, as a late spring snow fell softly past the window, Ridian looked up from a trade proposal. The merchants from the lowlands are requesting an extension of the Safe Passage Treaty. They're offering a 15% increase in the salt tax. In exchange, I put down my book on agricultural yields. 15 is low. They increased their caravan sizes by a third last year. The wear on our mountain pass is greater. We should counter with 25, settle for 20, and stipulate they use reinforced axles to minimize damage. Also, we should require them to carry and distribute warnings of rockfall conditions they observe. It turns a trade negotiation into a safety partnership. He stared at me for a long moment, then a slow, genuine smile spread across his face, a rare sight that still made my breath catch. Remind me never to negotiate against you. He made a note on the parchment. 20% and safety clauses. Done. He leaned back in his chair, studying me. You have a gift for this, Ilara. You see connections others miss. You turn problems into partnerships. The pack is thriving with you as Arden. The praise warmed me more than the fire. I'm just applying what you taught me, and what life taught me before that. You are applying it better than I could have hoped, he said quietly. His expression grew more serious. There is a gathering next month, the Festival of the Twin Moons. It is celebrated by all the mountain packs, a time of feasting, games, and alliance-making. I knew of it, a neutral event, much larger than the conclave, filled with tradition. Shadowcrest has often attended, but as observers. The Ghost Pack was welcomed with caution. He paused. This year, I would like us to attend not as observers, but as participants, as a respected pack, with our Arden at my side. It was a public declaration of a new era, of my official, uncontested place, a test of sorts, of how the wider world would accept the rogue-turned-strategist. I would be honored, I said, my voice steady. Good, he nodded, but a faint shadow crossed his eyes. Kieran's pack will also be there. The mention of his name no longer caused pain, just a quiet solemnity. He is bound by his oath, magically. He cannot approach me. I know, but seeing him, it may be difficult. I thought about it. It might be, but it will also be liberating. To stand before everyone as who I am, not as a reflection of his rejection. To show that the story didn't end with his cruelty, that it continued and became better. Ridian's gaze held mine, that golden intensity softening. It became infinitely better. The air between us shifted, charged with something unspoken that had been growing for months. A recognition, a connection that had nothing to do with fate's bonds, and everything to do with choice, respect, and a shared journey through fire. He looked away first, clearing his throat, the moment retreating but not vanishing. In the weeks leading to the festival, a different kind of preparation began. Lyra took charge of my wardrobe, insisting the Arden of Shadowcrest should look the part. The garments were not gaudy or restrictive, but beautifully made of fine, durable fabrics in deep forest colors, greens, browns, grays, embroidered with subtle patterns of wolves and mountain peaks. A ceremonial dagger, its hilt wrapped in leather worn smooth by Ridian's own father, was presented to me by the pack elders. The night before our departure, I stood on the battlements. The fortress was quiet, a sleeping giant. I felt its strength in the stones, heard its breath in the wind. This was my home. I had fought for it, bled for it, and helped it secure its peace. The title of Arden was not just a name, it was my soul's truth. I heard a step behind me. Ridian. Can't sleep? He asked, echoing our conversation from months ago. Too many thoughts, I admitted. He came to stand beside me, looking out at the moonlit valley. You're ready. I know, and I did. The last vestige of the trembling waitress was gone. I was thinking about my mother. She taught me to be invisible to survive. I think she'd be proud to see me standing in the moonlight, completely seen. She would, he said with conviction. You are her greatest legacy, not just a survivor, a creator. You helped create this piece. We stood in companionable silence for a long time, the bond between us not a magical tether, but a chosen one, woven from shared battles, mutual respect, and the quiet understanding of two souls who had found their place, and perhaps each other, in the shadow of the mountains. The next morning, our procession wound down the mountain. Warriors, families, elders. At its head rode Ridian and I, side by side, not as Alpha and Luna, but as King and Heart, as partners. As we approached the wide flowering valley where the Festival of the Twin Moons was in full swing, a riot of colors, scents, and sounds from a dozen packs, I felt the eyes upon us, the curious, the wary, the respectful. I don't know what to say. Say yes, Rydian said, his voice gentle, and then help me prepare to negotiate with a council of stubborn old wolves. We have a future to secure. As I left his study, the weight I felt was not of burden, but of belonging. The rejected girl was gone. In her place stood Elara Vance, Arden of Shadowcrest, and soon I would help decide the fate of the king who had once thought her nothing. The Silvermane Council arrived under a flag of truce, but the air still bristled with wounded pride. 5 elders, men whose faces were maps of long winters and hard decisions, were ushered into the great hall of Shadowcrest. They wore robes of state, their expressions carefully neutral, but their eyes held a storm of displeasure and deep embarrassment. At the head of our table sat Rydian, an image of calm, unmovable authority. I sat at his right hand, Lyra at his left. Silas and other commanders stood along the walls. We did not flaunt our strength, but it was palpably present in the disciplined silence of our warriors. Elder Oren, the eldest and most severe, spoke first. Alpha Vale, we come to retrieve our king and to understand the circumstances that led to this unfortunate breach of the peace. The circumstances are clear, Elder Oren, Rydian replied, his tone respectful but firm. Your king, driven by a personal grievance he himself created, launched an undeclared invasion of my lands. He spied, he trespassed, he killed my scouts, and he led an assault force over my walls. He was captured not in battle over territory, but in the midst of attempting to abduct a member of my pack from within my fortress. The unfortunate breach was a deliberate act of war. A younger elder, Garrick, bristled. The grievance stems from the mate bond, a sacred thing you interfered with. I interfered with nothing, Rydian said, his voice dropping a dangerous degree. I offered sanctuary to a wolf who had been publicly shattered and cast out, a wolf your king declared was nothing. He severed the bond. By our oldest laws, she became a free agent. He has no claim, sacred or otherwise. Elder Oren held up a gnarled hand, silencing Garrick. His shrewd eyes turned to me. You are the girl, Elara Vance. I am. I met his gaze, keeping my back straight. And you claim you did not lure our king, that you did not use the remnants of the bond to draw him into this folly. The accusation was expected. I claim that I served champagne at a party where your king chose to make me an object lesson in his power. I claim that I came here and worked to become more than that lesson. When he attacked my home, I acted to protect the people who had given me a home. I led him away to spare the civilians and the heart of this fortress. My actions were defense. His were obsession. She speaks with conviction, not like a victim nor a temptress, like a soldier reporting facts. The facts are damning, Rydian said. We have captured soldiers, their testimony, their gear. We have the body of my scout, killed in the Whisperwood. This was not a misunderstanding. It was a campaign, and it failed. Elder Oren sighed, the sound like wind through dry leaves. We have seen the preliminary reports. The council was not informed of the depth of his actions. We knew of his fixation, but not of the invasion plans. He acted alone in this madness. The admission cost him dearly. It was the formal disavowal of their king. What are your terms, Elder Vale? Elder Marin asked, cutting to the core. Rydian gestured to me. The wronged party has outlined the requirements for peace. All eyes fixed on me again. I took a steadying breath, channeling the calm I had seen in Rydian. First, a formal magical oath from the Silvermane Council, binding on all present and future leadership, recognizing the permanent sovereignty of Shadowcrest borders as they currently stand. Elder Oren gave a slow nod. Agreeable. We have no desire for your mountains. Second, war reparations, for the families of the fallen, for the damage to our eastern ridge, for the cost of mounting our defense, to be negotiated by Lyra and your steward. A pause, then another nod. Standard. It will be done. Third, I leaned forward slightly. a binding oath from Kieran Thorne himself and from this council as his guarantors that he never, for the remainder of his life, seek me, contact me, or order any action against me or my position within Shadowcrest. He will renounce any claim, real or imagined, past or future. I am to become a phantom to him, as he wished me to be at the gala, but this time by his own sworn word. The silence this time was profound. They understood. This was not about land or gold. It was about soul-deep closure. It was about stripping the last vestige of his false narrative. And if he refuses to swear this, Elder Garrick asked tightly, then he remains our guest, Rydian said softly, indefinitely. A king in a tower is of no use to his people. The elders conferred in low, urgent tones. Finally, Elder Orin turned back. We will put your terms to him. We cannot force his oath, but we can make the alternatives clear. They were taken to Kieran's quarters. The wait felt eternal. I watched the play of lights on the stone floor, my fate once again tied to the man who had rejected me, but this time I held the pen. When they returned, Kieran was with them. He looked like a stranger. The arrogant fury was gone, replaced by a drained, numb acceptance. He was still regal in bearing, but the light in his eyes had been extinguished. He looked at me, and there was no love, no hate, just a vast, empty recognition. The terms have been explained, Elder Orin said, his voice heavy. Alpha Thorne has agreed. A scribe was brought forward with a scroll of treaty parchment and a silver dagger for the blood oath. One by one, the elders pricked their thumbs, pressing them to the document, swearing to the border recognition and reparations. The magic in the air tingled, a promise woven into the very fabric of law. Then it was Kieran's turn. He took the dagger, his hand steady. He looked not at the parchment, but at me. I, Kieran Thorne, he said, his voice flat and hollow, do hereby renounce any and all claim to Elara Vance. I swear to never seek her, contact her, or cause her harm by action or inaction. I acknowledge her place within Shadowcrest as permanent and inviolable. May the magic of this oath strike me dead if I ever break this vow. He pressed his bleeding thumb to the scroll beside his name. A flash of silver light sealed the oath, burning the promise into him and the document. It was done. Truly, finally done. He straightened, handing the dagger back. His eyes met mine one last time. There was a tragic understanding there. He saw the woman he had created through his cruelty, a woman strong enough to help dictate the terms of his surrender. He gave the faintest, almost imperceptible nod, not of affection, but of acknowledgement, of defeat. The chase was over. The Ghost King had arrived, and the real reckoning was about to begin. The dawn painted the scene in stark, unforgiving light. On one side, Rydian, a figure of unyielding shadow and silent authority. On the other, Kieran, a king of ice and anger brought low by his own heat. And me, between them only in geography, my allegiance a settled fact in my own heart. Kieran's guards, finally catching up, formed a tense semicircle behind their alpha, weapons ready but faces uncertain. They saw the strategic disaster. They were deep in enemy territory, their main force likely in retreat, their leader isolated. This changes nothing, Vale, Kieran snarled, but the fury had a hollow ring. She is the cause of this, a rogue, a destabilizer. By the old accords, her life is forfeit for sparking a war between packs. Rydian didn't even blink. The old accords also state that an alpha who invades another's territory without formal declaration forfeits his right to invoke them. You are not here as a king enforcing law, Torn. You are here as a trespasser, a kidnapper, and a fool. He took a single step forward, and the Silvermane guards flinched. The war was sparked by your pride. The invasion was executed by your command. The life in question is under my protection. You have no standing here. Only two choices: submit to humiliation or force me to take them from you. The ultimatum hung in the thin mountain air. Submit to humiliation or die. Kieran's jaw worked. His eyes darted to the cliff edge, to me, then back to Rydian. I saw the calculation, the crumbling of his world. To fight Rydian here, exhausted and out of position, was suicide. To surrender was an end to his reign. It was one of his own betas, a grizzled man with a scarred face, who broke the stalemate. He stepped forward and placed his sword on the ground at Rydian's feet. The Silvermane Pack surrenders to your authority, Alpha Vale, on the condition our Alpha's life is spared and treated with the dignity of his rank. He did not look at Kieran. The betrayal in that single act was more devastating than any blade. One by one, the other guards followed suit. The clatter of their weapons was the sound of a crown falling from a great height. Kieran stood utterly alone, the dawn revealing the utter devastation on his face. He was a phantom king, stripped of everything: his mate, his victory, his command, his loyalty. The perfect edifice lay in ruins. Shadowcrest warriors, who had followed their Alpha's silent pursuit, emerged from the rocks to take the Silvermane warriors into custody. He then walked up to Kieran, stopping mere inches away. "Your war is over," Rydian said, so quietly only Kieran and I could hear. "You have lost. You will be held until your council can be summoned. They will decide your fate. I suggest you pray they are more merciful to you than you were to an innocent in a ballroom." Kieran said nothing. He just stared at the ground, a broken monument. Rydian turned and walked to me. His eyes scanned me for injury, his warrior's assessment giving way to something deeper, warmer. "That," he said, "was the single most reckless, brilliant, and terrifying thing I have ever witnessed." "Did it work?" I asked, my bravado fading now that the adrenaline was ebbing, leaving me shaking. "It worked perfectly. You split his force, broke his focus, and led him into a trap. You saved the fortress from a potentially devastating internal breach." He shook his head, a trace of awe in his expression. "You used his obsession against him, a masterstroke." He offered me his hand, not to pull me from the cliff edge, but in steadying solidarity. I took it, his grip warm and sure. "Come, let's go home." The return to Shadowcrest was a somber victory. The invading force in the gorge and at the ridge had been repelled, with heavy losses on both sides, but the fortress stood. The captured Silvermane warriors were secured in the holding cells, treated firmly but without cruelty. Kieran was placed in a separate, comfortable but secure room, a king's prison. In the days that followed, a strange quiet descended. The immediate threat was gone, but the world had shifted. Messengers were sent north to the Silvermane Council of Elders. The news of Kieran's capture, his failed personal vendetta, and the illegal invasion would spread like wildfire. I found myself in a new role. The pack no longer saw me as the fragile refugee or the Alpha's puzzling project. They saw the woman who had drawn the enemy king away from their families. Nods of respect replaced curious glances. Warriors would stop me and ask, "How did you know to run for the Falcon's Perch?" Or, "That sword throw was a brave distraction." I was one of them now, my worth proven not by bloodline, but by action. One evening, Rydian summoned me to his study. He looked tired but satisfied. Maps were cleared away, replaced by a simple pot of tea. "The Silvermane Council will be here in 3 days," he said without preamble. "They are not happy with him or with the situation. They will want to negotiate his return and likely reparations." "Will you give him back?" I asked, stirring my tea. "It depends. On their terms, on his state of mind, mostly on you." "On me?" "You were the wronged party. His actions were, from start to finish, centered on you. Your testimony, your wishes, will carry significant weight with the council. They are traditionalists, but even they cannot ignore the sheer idiocy of starting a war over a rejected mate." He leaned forward. "What do you want, Ilara? Do you want him punished, exiled, stripped of his title?" I thought of Kieran on the cliff, hollowed out by his own choices. I felt no vengeance, only a profound sadness. The bond was gone, but the memory of its potential, however twisted by him, was a bittersweet ghost. I don't want his life or his misery. I just want security, assurance. I want him to understand that I am not a possession to be reclaimed. I want a treaty that guarantees Shadowcrest's borders and my place within them are inviolable. I want his word and his council's binding oath that he will never seek me, contact me, or threaten my pack again. Rydian listened. A slow smile touched his lips. "Not punishment, security, a future. You think like a true leader, Ilara, not with a claw, but with a shield." He nodded. "That will be our starting position, strong, fair, and unassailable." He poured more tea. there is something else. The pack, they have seen what you are made of. Lyra, Silas, the elders, they have approached me. They believe that one who fights for the pack, who strategizes for its safety, and who stands beside its alpha should have a formal place within it. My breath caught. What kind of place? The title is Ardon. It is old, from a time before Lona's. It means heart of the fortress, a strategist, a protector of the home, a trusted right hand. It is not a title given by bond or blood, but by earned trust and proven loyalty. His golden eyes held mine, serious and warm. They wish to offer it to you, and I wish to accept their recommendation. Tears, hot and sudden, blurred my vision. It was everything I had never dared to dream of. A name, a place, a purpose chosen and earned, not a mate's shadow, but a pillar in my own right. The cold air of the stairwell hit me like a slap. The sounds of battle were muffled here, replaced by the thunder of my own pulse and the ragged scrape of my breath. I shed the soft indoor shoes I wore, my feet finding the cold stone steps and the stockings I still had from the command tier. Silence was my weapon now. The door at the bottom was heavy oak, barred from the inside. I slid the bar back slowly, the groan of wood lost in the distant cacophony. A sliver of chaos-tinged moonlight seeped in. I peered out. The outer courtyard was a scene from a dark dream. Torches guttered, casting frantic shadows as wolves and men clashed. The sharp, metallic scent of blood and the sour tang of fear filled the air. And there, in the center, was a silver behemoth, Kieran. He had shifted back to human form, shouting orders, his face a mask of frenzied purpose as he pointed toward the inner keep's main door. "Find her! Tear the place apart! She is in there!" His obsession was a blinding beacon. Perfect. I didn't step into the light. I stayed in the deep shadow of the stable wall, a patch of darkness Rydian had taught me to become. I saw a Shadowcrest warrior fall, his weapon clattering just a few feet from my hiding spot. A short sword, simple and lethal. My hands, now strong and calloused from training, closed around the leather-bound hilt. The weight was both foreign and familiar. I couldn't win a fight, but I could start a chase. Taking a deep breath of the charged air, I did the most visible thing I could think of. I threw the sword. Not at anyone. I hurled it with all my strength across the cobblestones, away from the inner keep, toward the archway that led to the winding mountain path down to the lower villages. It skidded and clattered with a racket that cut through the localized din. Heads turned. Kieran snapped around. For a fraction of a second, I stepped out of the shadow, letting the flickering torchlight catch my face, my hair, the determined set of my jaw. So different from the broken girl he remembered. I let him see me, see that I was outside, see that I was fleeing away from the fortress heart. Our eyes met across the bloody courtyard. In his, confusion warred with triumph. He saw his prey, vulnerable, exposed, running. His strategic mind, clouded by obsession, saw only the prize escaping. "Forget the doors! She's there! After her!" He shifted back into his wolf form in a ripple of silver light and surged forward, his elite guard breaking off their assault to follow him. A contingent of Shadowcrest warriors, seeing the pressure lift, moved to seal the breached postern gate. My heart hammered against my ribs. The bait was taken. Now I had to be the ghost. I turned and ran, not with the clumsy desperation of my old self, but with the focused, energy-conserving gait Silas had drilled into me. I flew through the archway and onto the steep, rocky path. The night swallowed me, the sounds of the fortress battle fading behind, replaced by the pounding of paws and shouts drawing closer from my back. I knew this path. I had run it 100 times in training. I knew where it was narrow, where it skirted a drop, where an old landslide had created a scree field. I used it all. I was smaller, lighter, and I knew the terrain like my own heartbeat. They were larger, stronger, but burdened by armor and blinded by the chase. I led them on a twisting, turning route, ducking behind boulders, scrambling up shortcuts only a goat or a desperate woman would take. I could hear Kieran's enraged howls as I slipped from view again and again. I wasn't fighting him. I was exhausting him. I was wasting his time, his energy, his focus, drawing him further and further from his objective, from his army. The sky began to lighten from black to deep indigo, staining the sharp peaks. My lungs burned, my muscles screamed, but a fierce, wild exhilaration kept me moving. I was no longer a victim being hunted. I was a strategist executing a plan. I was protecting my pack. I reached a place called the Falcon's Perch, a sharp outcropping where the path forked. One way led down to the village, a path of salvation for me, but also of potential civilian casualties if he followed. The other led up to a dead-end ridge overlooking a sheer cliff. I chose the cliff. I scrambled up the final rise and turned, chest heaving, to face the path. Moments later, Kieran emerged. He was in human form again, his clothes torn, his face streaked with dirt and sweat, his eyes wild. His guards were strung out behind him, struggling to keep up. He saw me, cornered against the sheer drop in the morning sky, and a terrible, victorious smile spread across his face. "Nowhere left to run, little ghost. You led a fine chase, but it's over. You're coming home." The word home sounded like a curse. I backed up until my heels were at the very edge. The wind plucked at my clothes. Far below, the river was a silver thread in the gloom. "It was never my home," I said, my voice carried away by the wind. "You made sure of that." "I was wrong." The admission was a shout, torn from him. "I see you now. The strength, the fire. It should have been mine to nurture. He stole it." "No one stole anything. You threw it away, and I found someone who knew its value." "Value," he spat. "He is a king of beggars and thieves. I can give you a throne, a legacy." "You can give me a cage," I said, my voice dropping, filled with the pity that seemed to enrage him more than hate ever could. "A gilded, glorious cage. I'd rather be free on this cliff with the wind in my face than a prisoner in your golden hall, Kieran, even if freedom lasts only a second more." His face crumpled, then hardened into something desperate and ugly. "If I cannot have you, no one will." He took another step, his hand outstretched, not to grab me, but to push. But as he moved, a shadow detached itself from the rocks above the path behind him. Rydian. He landed between Kieran and me, silent as snowfall, his own blade bare and gleaming in the nascent dawn. He was covered in the grime of battle, a cut on his temple bleeding freely, but his stance was steady, his golden eyes burning with a cold, terrifying fire. "You will not touch her," he said, his voice quiet and absolute. "You have pursued a member of my pack to the edge of a cliff. You have abandoned your command, your strategy, and your honor for a personal vendetta. The King of the North is now just a man who has lost everything, and you are on my land." Kieran stared, his triumph turning to ash. He looked from Rydian's resolute form to my defiant stance on the cliff's edge, to his own exhausted, outmaneuvered guards. The reality of his catastrophic failure dawned in his eyes. All eyes turned to me. I felt a flush creep up my neck but held my ground. At the conclave, Kieran was all pride and public demand. "This," I gestured vaguely toward the reported patrols, "this is stealthy. He's trying to look strong for his pack, to show he's acting after his humiliation, but sending a few extra patrols into a disputed gorge? It's a whisper, not a shout. He's hoping you'll shout back, Rydian. He wants you to be the aggressor, to justify a larger move." Rydian studied me, his amber gaze inscrutable. After a moment, a slow nod. "Alara is correct. It's a political maneuver. He tightens the leash to see if I'll growl. We will not growl. We will become a stone. Silent, implacable. Let him waste his energy on shadows." His confidence was absolute, a fortress in itself. Yet as we passed through the gates of Shadowcrest, the air inside felt different. The quiet discipline was now edged with a sharp readiness. The forge I had been training in was no longer just for my benefit, it was preparing for a potential fire. The next 2 weeks were a lesson in controlled tension. My training intensified, but its focus shifted. Silas taught me not just to fight, but to end a fight. Quick, efficient, disabling moves. Rydian took me to the war room daily, where maps were updated with tiny markers representing Silvermane movements. He quizzed me relentlessly. "Where is the true threat?" he asked one evening, pointing to a cluster of markers in the gorge. "Not there," I said, my finger tracing a line further east, to a seemingly quiet stretch of dense forest called the Whisperwood. "The gorge is hard rock, easy to defend. The Whisperwood is older, darker. The canopy is thick enough to hide movement from aerial scouts. The river there is shallow, fordable in a dozen places. If he wants to move a real force, a strike force, he'd do it there. The gorge is the distraction. Lyra, who was present, raised an eyebrow. Rydian simply nodded. Send 2 extra scout pairs to the Whisperwood. Deep reconnaissance. Silent. Tell them to watch for signs of passage, not just patrols. The order was given. The fortress waited. The proof came not with a roar, but with the return of a single scout, her arm bandaged, her face grim. She spoke directly to Rydian in the crowded hall, not caring who heard. Alpha, the Whisperwood, a full company, moving under Lightfoot enchantments, specialist gear. They weren't patrolling, they were positioning. We were spotted on our way out. They took out Jax. Her voice hitched. I barely made it. A cold fury settled over Rydian's features, different from Kieran's hot rage. This was the cold of deep space. How many? 50, maybe more. Objective? The scout couldn't determine, but their line was pointed here. The word hung in the air. Here, the fortress. Kieran wasn't just posturing, he was deploying a spear aimed at our heart, and he had used the gorge as a shield for his real intention. Rydian turned, his gaze sweeping the room, landing on each of his commanders, on Silas, on Lyra, and finally on me. He has made his move. He has spilled Shadowcrest blood on our own land. The time for stones is over. He looked at me, and in his eyes I saw the Ghost King fully awakened. Ilara, you saw what he did not want seen. That insight just saved us from a dagger in the dark. Now we show him the price of throwing that dagger. He began issuing commands, rapid and precise. Defensive perimeters were reinforced. Non-combatants were moved to the deep shelters. The forges worked through the night, the ring of hammers a war drum. I found him later on the high battlements, watching the moon rise over the Whisperwood. What do I do? I asked, my voice small against the vast night. You stay in the command tier with Lyra. You listen, you learn. You are our eyes on the maps, a mind he does not expect and cannot predict. I want to do more. I need to. He turned to me. You already have. Strategy wins wars before the first arrow is fired. You have given us that. Now trust your pack to be the shield, and trust me to be the sword. 2 nights later, the attack came. Not at the main gates, but at the eastern ridge, the very ridge I had pointed out weeks ago as vulnerable to climbers. They came in the dead hour before dawn, using silenced tools and shrouding spells. Our sensors, as I'd feared, were jammed. But they were not unexpected. The first wave of Silvermane specialists crested the ridge to find not a sleeping garrison, but a line of Shadowcrest warriors waiting in utter silence. Rydian had not just reinforced the ridge, he had baited it. The silence shattered into chaos. The clash was brutal and intimate in the narrow space. From the command center, a room carved into the mountain behind thick glass, I watched the battle on glowing monitors fed by enchanted crystals. I saw Silas, a giant in wolf form, breaking a line. I saw Lyra directing runners with icy calm. And I saw Rydian. He fought not as a beast, but as a tempest. He was a blur of dark motion, human form wielding a blade that seemed to drink the moonlight. His movements, so efficient, they were beautiful and horrifying. He didn't rage. He calculated. Every step, every parry, every strike was a sentence in a deadly argument. He was proving his point to Kieran. Your perfect soldiers are no match for those who have fought for every scrap of their existence. But then I saw him. On a secondary monitor, a smaller force of Silvermane had broken through a lower postern gate. They were inside the outer courtyard, and leading them was Kieran Thorne. He was in his glorious silver wolf form, larger than any other, a creature of myth and fury. He tore through the defenders, his eyes scanning wildly, not for the keep, but for me. He was a spear aimed at a single target. He's not here for the fortress. He's here for me, I whispered, cold dread pouring into my veins. Lyra followed my gaze and cursed. The arrogant fool. He thinks this is a kidnapping raid. She grabbed a runner. Redirect Beta Team to the outer courtyard. The Alpha is engaged on the ridge. They must hold Thorne. But I saw the numbers. Our forces were stretched. Kieran's personal guard was cutting a path straight toward the inner doors, toward my tower. A terrifying clarity washed over me. This was my fault. My presence was the crack, and cracks had to be sealed from the inside or the outside. I looked from the monitor showing Rydian holding the critical high ground to the one showing Kieran carving a path of destruction toward me. Rydian couldn't be in two places at once. The fortress needed its king on the wall, but it also needed the bait removed from the trap. I have to go, I said to Lyra. Absolutely not. The Alpha's orders are to protect the pack. He's drawing our forces inward, creating gaps elsewhere. If I lead him away from the heart, if I make him chase a ghost, we break his plan. Before she could stop me, I ran not deeper into the mountain, but toward a small, disused servant stair I had found during my explorations. It led down to the old stables near the outer courtyard. My heart was a wild drum, my training screaming at me that this was suicide, but my new instinct, the one Rydian had nurtured, whispered a strategy. Kieran wanted the rejected waitress he could drag back in chains. I would give him the ghost he couldn't catch. Viridia was nothing like the Celestial Hall. It was raw and wild, an island of ancient stone and towering pines. The meeting hall was a great circular lodge of timber and glass, open to the elements on one side. Here, the power wasn't cloaked in silk and champagne. It was worn openly in scars, in the size of one's shifted form, in the steadiness of one's gaze. The Silvermane delegation arrived like a cold front, Kieran Thorne at its center, looking harder and leaner than I remembered, his icy aura seeming to frost the air around him. His eyes found our group immediately, zeroing in on me with an intensity that felt like a physical grip. I forced myself to meet his stare, to not look away. The scar of the rejection throbbed, but it was a distant echo. The woman he'd rejected was not the one standing here. The formal proceedings were a drone of territory disputes and trade agreements. I sat beside Rydian, not as a servant, but as a member of his retinue. I listened, I learned. I saw how Rydian navigated the politics, concise, firm, never backing down but never provoking needlessly. He was respected, even by those who feared him. It was during a break, as I stood near a balcony overlooking the churning sea, that the confrontation I knew was coming finally arrived. Ilara. His voice was behind me. I turned slowly. Kieran stood alone, having detached himself from Seraphina and his beta. Up close, I could see the shadows under his eyes, a tension in his jaw that hadn't been there before. He looked haunted. Alpha Thorne, I said, my voice neutral. He flinched at the formal title. You look different. I am different. He's changed you. The accusation was bitter. Twisted you. That savage has no right. He has given me every right, I interrupted, a spark of the new fire in me igniting. The right to safety, to training, to respect. Rights you revoked when you called me nothing in front of 300 people. His composure cracked. I made a mistake. The words were torn from him, low and strained. The confession stunned me into silence. The rejection? It was a political necessity, but it was a mistake. I feel it, every day. He took a step closer, his scent of frost and pine now smelling of desperation. The bond? It's gone. But the place where it was? It's empty. It's a void, Ilara. Come back. Let me fix this. Let me claim you properly. Reject the protection of that ghost. Your place is with me. For a moment, I saw not the arrogant king, but a man in genuine, bewildered pain. The ghost of the bond I still carried whispered in sympathy. It would be so easy to go back, to be the chosen one, the redeemed queen, the fantasy I'd once had. But then I saw Seraphina watching from across the lodge, her face a mask of jealous fury. I remembered the feel of broken glass under my palms. I remembered the cold finality in his eyes. This wasn't about me. This was about the void he felt. This was about possession. You had your chance to claim me, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. You did. You claimed your bloodline, your politics, your pride. You chose them. They are your mate now, Kieran, not me. His face paled with anger. He has poisoned your mind. You are coming back with me now. His hand shot out to grab my arm, but before his fingers could close, another hand wrapped around his wrist, stopping it dead. Rydian stood between us, his movement so swift I hadn't seen him approach. His grip looked casual, but Kieran's arm trembled with the strain of trying to break it. "The lady," Rydian said, his voice a quiet, deadly rasp that carried in the sudden hush, "is under my protection. She has spoken her choice. You will respect it, or you will answer to me, here, now." The entire lodge was watching, alphas, betas, warriors, all frozen. This was the crack in the world, laid bare. Kieran wrenched his arm back, his fury palpable. "This defiance will cost you everything." Kieran spat, looking past Rydian to me, his eyes blazing with a promise of vengeance. Then he turned on his heel and stormed away, his pack scrambling to follow. The silence lingered, then broke into a torrent of whispers. Rydian didn't move until they were gone. Then he turned to me. "Are you all right?" I nodded, my heart hammering. I told him no. I heard a flicker of that almost smile. "You sounded very convincing." I meant it. "I know." He looked toward Kieran had disappeared. "The mistake he admits is not rejecting you. It's the humiliation of it. He believes if he had done it quietly, he could have kept you in a gilded cage somewhere, a secret shame. He cannot understand that the cage itself was the crime." He offered me his arm. "Come, our business here is done. The next move is his, and we will be ready." As we walked back to our quarters, the eyes of the gathered alphas followed us, but the gaze I felt most was the one burning with hatred from the northern delegation. The line was drawn, not in secret missives, but in front of the entire shifter leadership. Kieran Thorne had declared his intent, and by standing my ground, I had declared mine. I was not returning to the north. I was standing with Shadowcrest. The girl who had been erased at the Gadalef had just written her name on the wall of history in bold, defiant strokes. The war of words was over. The real storm was on the horizon. The journey back from Viridia was made in a silence thicker than the mountain mist. Rydian was a figure of coiled intensity, his gaze fixed on the darkening pine forests that marked the border between neutral land and Shadowcrest. The confrontation with Kieran had been a declaration, and declarations in our world were often written in blood. Lyra broke the silence, her voice crisp in the confined space of the vehicle. "Scouts report increased Silvermane patrols along the Black River Gorge, double the usual numbers. They're testing the edges." Rydian didn't look away from the window. "They're probing for weakness. He wants to see if we'll flinch. We will not. Increase our patrols, but order no engagement unless directly crossed. I want no spark from our side." "But Alpha," Silas rumbled from the front seat, "they're in the gray zone, a mile closer than the treaty allows. It's a provocation." "It's a feint," I said softly. He was an enigma, a king who treated his pack with a rough, familiar respect. A man who could dissect a political maneuver with chilling precision one moment, and the next, show me how to sharpen a knife with a stone. He never spoke of Kieran. He never asked about the bond. Our conversations were of history, terrain, pack structure, philosophy. He was rebuilding my mind as surely as he was rebuilding my body. One afternoon, Lyra interrupted a lesson on border patrol patterns. Her flinty eyes were sharper than usual. "Alpha, a hawk from the northern pass. It's marked with the Silvermane seal." A stillness settled over Rydian. He took the small metal cylinder from her, broke the seal, and unrolled a slender scroll. His eyes scanned the text, his expression giving nothing away. He looked up, his gaze finding me. "It seems your former mate is not content with his choice," he said, his voice devoid of emotion. He handed me the scroll. My fingers trembled as I took it. The handwriting was bold, arrogant. "Rydian Vale, The matter of the rogue Ilara Vance remains unresolved. Her presence in your territory is an affront and a destabilizing influence. Her true place is here, under the supervision of her rightful alpha, to answer for the disruption she has caused. Return her by the next full moon. Failure to comply will be considered an act of aggression. Karen Thorne, Alpha King, Silvermane. The words blurred. Answer for the disruption she has caused. The injustice of it stole my breath. He had shattered me in public, and now he wanted me to answer for it? Her rightful alpha. The bond was gone. He had made sure of that. He can't do this, I whispered, anger rising hot and clean, burning away the last of the hurt. He rejected me. He severed it. I am not his. In his mind, you are a possession he discarded that another man picked up, Rydian said, taking the scroll back. His pride cannot abide it. This is not about you, Ilara. This is about a crack in his perfect image. My defiance made the crack visible. What will you do? Lyra asked, her voice tight. Rydian walked to the window, looking out toward the north. I will reply. He spent the evening in his study, writing. I wasn't invited. The fortress, usually a hive of quiet activity, grew tense. Warriors checked weapons, scouts were dispatched. The air smelled of oiled steel and apprehension. The next morning, he summoned me to the courtyard. He held his own scroll. This is my response, he said. He didn't read it to me, but his eyes held mine. I have told Karen Thorne that you are under the permanent protection of Shadowcrest, that you are a free wolf who has chosen her allegiance, that any attempt to retrieve you will be met with the full and unrelenting force of my pack, and that if he considers that aggression, then he should prepare for war. The word hung in the cold air. War. Because of me. Guilt, immense and suffocating, crashed down. You can't risk your pack for me. Just let me go. I'll disappear. I'll go back to the city. No. The word was final, a stone door slamming shut. You are not a bargaining chip. You are not a peace offering. If I let him bully me into surrendering someone under my protection, I am not a king. I am a servant, and my pack is not a pack. It is a convenience. He stepped closer. You asked what you were fighting for. Now you know. You are fighting for the right to choose. He wants to take that away. Again. I'm not worth a war, I said, the old belief clinging on. That, Rydian said, a flicker of that dangerous fire in his eyes, is for me to decide. Your task is to become someone who can survive one. The training changed. It became harder, faster, more urgent. Silas, the massive Gamma, took over my physical conditioning. He was a merciless but fair taskmaster. Rydian began teaching me strategy. We would pore over maps of the northern border, and he would quiz me. If you were Karen, how would you attack this pass? I'd send a small, fast team at night to sabotage the watchtower. Why? Because the main force is too obvious. The geography favors defenders. You'd need to blind them first. A slow nod of approval. Good. And how would you defend against that? The lessons were no longer abstract. They were blueprints for a potential battle. My mind, used to hiding, began to think in terms of angles, advantages, and weaknesses. I started to see the fortress not as a beautiful cage, but as a system of interconnected defenses. I learned the patrol schedules, the safe rooms, the escape tunnels. One night, unable to sleep, I wandered to the library. I found Rydian there, staring into the dying fire, a forgotten book on his lap. Can't sleep? He asked without turning. I keep thinking about the border. The Western Ridge, it's vulnerable to climbers, isn't it? If they had the right equipment. He turned then, a look of genuine surprise on his face. It is. We have sensors, but they can be jammed. I've ordered additional patrols there. He studied me. You see it now. The board, the pieces. I see people who have been kind to me, who might die because of a choice I didn't make. The choice was his, Rydian said firmly. Remember that. Every consequence that comes from this is born from his pride, not your existence. He stepped closer. Come, there's something you should see. He led me to a part of the fortress I hadn't seen, a wide inner balcony overlooking the main hall. Below, by the central hearth, warriors were resting, talking in low tones, maintaining their gear. Families were there too, mates, children, elders. A young boy was having his boot fixed by a grizzlied warrior. An elderly woman was handing out cups of hot tea. This, Rydian said softly, is what he threatens. Not just soldiers on a wall, a community, a home. We are not a pure bloodline. We are a chosen family. We fight not for glory, but for the right to exist as we are. You are part of that now, so we fight for you too. The sight below, the simple, profound normality of it, struck me deeper than any speech. This was what Kieran, in his sterile world of bloodlines and power, would never understand. This was worth protecting. As the full moon drew nearer, the tension became a living thing. But my fear had transformed. It was no longer the fear of being a victim. It was the fierce, protective fear of a wolf for its den. I might not be a warrior yet, but I was Shadowcrest. And when Kieran Thorne looked north, he was no longer looking at a weak girl he could summon back. He was looking at a fortress, and I was learning to be part of its walls. The full moon came and went without an attack. The tension didn't break. It coiled tighter, a spring waiting for release. The next pressure point, Rydian informed me, would be the annual Alpha Conclave held on the neutral island of Iridia, a gathering for diplomacy, trade, and display, and this year, a stage. You don't have to go, Rydian told me as we prepared to leave. A small elite contingent was traveling with us, Lyra, Silas, and a handful of his best. I packed a small bag with the practical, well-made clothes Lyra had provided. I paused, holding a dark green tunic. Will he be there? Yes. And will he demand my return again, in front of everyone? It is likely. I placed the tunic in the bag. Then I'm going. I won't hide while you face him because of me. I won't let him think I'm something to be locked away. Rydian watched me, a faint, unreadable expression in his eyes. It might have been approval. As you wish. For 3 days, I saw Rydian only at a distance. Lyra brought my meals, her demeanor coolly professional. I explored the suite, my wolf restless and confused. The bond's absence was a constant low-grade pain, like a toothache of the soul. But something else was growing, a prickling awareness of the fortress itself. It hummed with a quiet, disciplined energy. I heard the distant clang of metal from a training yard, the low murmur of voices, the orderly rhythm of a pack that did not lounge in luxury, but lived in readiness. On the 4th morning, Lyra entered without knocking. The Alpha requests your presence in the south courtyard, where the training gear provided. My heart jumped. Training gear. A knot of anxiety tightened in my stomach. Was this where the real price of his protection would be revealed? Where the weak, rejected rogue would be broken for sport? The south courtyard was a wide, flat expanse of hard-packed earth, surrounded by high walls. Various training apparatus, padded posts, climbing ropes, obstacle courses, stood silent like challenges. And in the center stood Rydian. He looked similarly to me, in simple, dark training clothes. He looked not like a king, but like a blade, honed and ready. A few other warriors were present, going through their own drills, but they gave us a wide berth. Good, he said as I approached. Did I have a choice? Always, he replied, his tone neutral. You could have refused, and I would have had Lyra escort you to the border. Protection is offered, not imposed. But you are here, so we begin with the most basic question. What can you do? I blinked. I served champagne. I cleaned rooms. I stayed invisible. Survival skills, he nodded, as if I'd listed advanced combat techniques. Good. Invisibility is a form of stealth. Now, can you fight? No. Can you shift at will? My wolf whimpered inside. I had shifted so rarely and always in terrified, secret moments. Not reliably. Can you fire a gun, track a scent, read a territory map? No, and no. He didn't look disappointed. He looked interested. A blank slate. Heavy with the wrong kind of weight, but a slate nonetheless. He pointed to a line painted on the ground. Run to that wall and back, as fast as you can. It was a test, a simple, brutal test. I took off, pushing my legs, which felt like wood. I was breathless and slow by the time I stumbled back to the line. One of the warriors across the yard chuckled softly. Rydian didn't react to the laugh. His eyes were on me, assessing me. Your cardiovascular strength is negligible. Your muscles are underdeveloped. Your wolf is dormant, buried under fear and malnutrition. Kieran didn't just reject a mate. He rejected a lifetime of neglect. There was no pity in his voice. It was a factual analysis, and somehow that was worse. You are not weak, Elira. You are untrained and underfed. Those are problems with solutions. He spent the next 2 hours putting me through a grueling basic regimen. Push-ups I could barely manage, sit-ups that burned, squats that made my legs tremble. He didn't touch me. He didn't yell. He simply gave instructions and watched, his amber eyes missing nothing. When I collapsed onto the dirt, gasping, my vision spotted with black, he crouched beside me. The first time is always the worst, because it's the first time you're fighting for something instead of just running from it. I drank greedily, water spilling down my chin. What am I fighting for? I rasped. That, he said, standing, is for you to decide. But fight you will, because the world is not a gala, Alara. It is this courtyard, and in here, you either get stronger or you get broken. Up. Again. The days fell into a punishing rhythm. Dawn in the courtyard with Rydian, afternoons with Lyra, who taught me pack history, territory maps, and the complex politics of the shifter world I'd only ever skirted. Evenings alone in my suite, my body a symphony of aches, my mind buzzing with new information. I began to notice things. The way the warriors, after the first few days, stopped their subtle sneers. They watched with cautious curiosity. I saw the respect they afforded Rydian, not the fearful obedience Kieran commanded, but a deep-seated, earned loyalty. I heard snippets about the Ghost King, how he took a pack of outcasts and survivors and forged them into the most formidably independent force in the region. He didn't conquer territory, he acquired allies through ruthless fairness. He was feared, but not hated. One evening, after a particularly brutal session focusing on balance and fall techniques, I found myself sitting with Rydian on a low wall overlooking the darkening valley. We were both sweaty, breathing in the cold air. Why do they call you the Ghost King? The question left my lips before I could stop it. He was silent for so long I thought he wouldn't answer. Because I lead a pack many thought were dead. Outcasts, rogues who were wronged, wolves who survived when their packs did not. We move unseen when we wish. We know how to live in the shadows the pure packs pretend don't exist. He looked at me. I'm not a warrior, I said, the old shame rising. Not yet, he agreed, but you are a survivor, and survivors learn, they adapt. He paused. Tell me about your mother. The sudden shift jarred me. My throat closed. I never spoke of her. She died when I was young. Before she died, what did she teach you? Tears, hot and unexpected, pricked my eyes. She taught me to be quiet, to hide my scent, to sew up tears in clothing so no one would see, to find food where others didn't look. The lessons of poverty and fear. Rydian nodded slowly. Resourcefulness, resilience, situational awareness. These are not the lessons of a weak woman, Elira. These are the foundational lessons of a strategist. She was preparing you for a war you didn't know you were in. No one had ever framed my mother's fear as strength. No one had ever framed my survival as anything but pathetic. A crack appeared in the wall of shame around my heart. Later that night, staring at the star-strewn sky from my window, I realized the phantom pain of the rejection, while still present, had a new companion, a faint, stubborn ember of possibility. Rydian wasn't building a queen for a throne. He seemed to be unpacking a tool from a rusty box, curious to see what it was made for. And for the first time, I was curious too. A month folded into the mountain shadow. The sharp edge of rejection pain had dulled to a permanent ache, a scar on my spirit. In its place, a new sensation grew. The burn of strengthening muscle, the satisfying click of new knowledge, the fragile seedling of self-respect. My body changed. The softness of malnutrition was replaced by lean definition. I could run the length of the courtyard without seeing stars. I could hold a defensive stance for minutes without collapsing. I still couldn't shift on command, but my wolf was no longer a cowering creature. She paced, alert, watching Radian with a wary fascination that mirrored my own. I hesitated for only a second before placing my fingers lightly on his forearm. His muscles were steel cables beneath the fine fabric of his sleeve. As we turned to walk away, I glanced back once. Kieran was not looking at Radian. He was staring directly at me, and in his eyes, beneath the rage and the disdain, something new flickered, a shock of something that looked like possessive, bewildered agony. It was gone in an instant, replaced by smoldering hatred, but I had seen it. The bond was gone, severed by his own words, but its ghost had just haunted his gaze. Radian led me out of the hall, not through the servants' quarters, but through the main entrance, under the stunned scrutiny of the assembled elite. The heavy doors thudded shut behind us, muffling the uproar that shortly followed. An armored vehicle, matte black and sleek as a panther, waited at the curb. A warrior with a scar across his cheek held the door open, his expression impassive. Radian handed me in first, then followed, filling the spacious interior with his presence. The door closed, sealing us in a quiet, plush tomb. The vehicle pulled away from the glittering lights of the celestial hall. I huddled against the door, as far from him as the space would allow, trembling not from cold, but from shock. The full weight of what had happened began to crush me. The rejection pain was a constant throbbing ache, a phantom limb that screamed it was still there. "You're shivering." His voice in the quiet was like a stone dropped into a still pond. I flinched. "I'm fine," I stammered, the lie pathetic. "You're not," he said, simply. He didn't touch me. He just reached into a compartment and pulled out a thick, soft blanket of dark wool. He held it out. "Your body is in shock, from the severance and from the adrenaline." I took the blanket, my fingers fumbling. I wrapped it around my shoulders. It smelled like him, cedar and ozone. It was strangely calming. "Why?" The question burst from me, ragged and raw. "Why did you do that? I'm nothing to you. He was right. I'm just a tool to mock him with." Radian turned his head to look out the window at the city blurring past. "Kieran Thorne believes the world is a ledger. Bloodlines, power, alliances, everything is a calculated sum. He believes he just subtracted a zero." He looked back at me, his eyes catching the passing streetlights. I have never found his arithmetic to be correct. "That's not an answer," I whispered. "No," he agreed. "It's not. The answer is, I disliked the spectacle. I disliked the waste." He leaned forward slightly, and the intensity in his gaze pinned me in place. "Kieran Thorne tried to erase you, Alara, in front of everyone. I am simply unerasing you. For now, that is all you need to know." The journey lasted over an hour, moving from city lights to winding mountain roads draped in velvet darkness. The vehicle finally slowed and passed through monstrous iron gates that groaned open. We entered a courtyard lit by torches that flickered against walls of sheer black stone. The Shadow Crest Fortress wasn't a palace, it was a sentinel, carved into the very bones of the mountain. The door opened to cold, thin air. Before I could move, Radian was out and offering his hand to help me down. I took it, my legs still unsteady. The courtyard was not empty. Lines of warriors stood at silent attention. They wore dark, practical gear, not ceremonial dress. Their eyes, reflecting the torchlight, tracked me with a unified, unnerving focus. They scented the air, smelling Kieran's rejection on me like a stain, and their new alpha's clear, protective claim layered over it. A woman stepped forward. She was older, her silver hair swept into a severe knot, her posture rigid. Her eyes, a flinty gray, swept over me with an efficiency that missed nothing. The ruined uniform, the blood, the blanket clutched like a child's security. "Alpha," she acknowledged with a crisp nod. "You've brought a guest." "I have brought a resident, Lyra," Radian said, his tone leaving no room for debate. "Prepare the skyward suite, the one with the view of the eastern peaks." Lyra's eyebrows lifted a fraction. "The Alpha Consort Suite? But sir, it has been sealed since—" "Did I stutter, Lyra?" Radian's voice dropped softer than ever, and the temperature in the courtyard seemed to plummet 10 degrees. Lyra's spine straightened further. "No, Alpha, it will be done." Her eyes flicked to me again. "Shall I have the healer attend?" "No. A medical kit and a full meal to my study. Now." He didn't wait for her reply. He placed a guiding hand on my back, its warmth seeping through the blanket, and led me up broad stone steps and into the heart of the fortress. The interior was a revelation. It wasn't opulent, but profoundly solid. Great fireplaces roared, casting dancing light on walls hung with maps and ancient tapestries depicting wolves under starlit skies. It felt alive and watchful and old. His study was a room of knowledge and quiet power, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, a great desk of weathered oak, and large windows that currently showed nothing but blackness. He guided me to a deep armchair by the fire. "Sit, please." I sat, sinking into the leather. Lyra arrived silently with a tray of food, a bowl of rich steaming stew, crusty bread, roasted vegetables, and a metal first aid kit. She set them down and left without a word. Rydian pulled a stool over and sat before me. He opened the kit. "Your hands." I held them out, palms up. The cuts were shallow but numerous, glittering with tiny fragments. My werewolf healing, always sluggish due to poor nutrition and a subdued wolf, was barely stitching the skin. He clicked his tongue, a soft sound of disapproval. "You heal like a human." He set to work with a frightening competence, using tweezers to remove the glass, his touch clinical, yet careful. "When did you last eat a proper meal?" I thought of the dry bread crust I'd snapped in the kitchen before the gala. "This morning." "That," he said, dipping a cloth in antiseptic, "was not a meal. That was a postponement of starvation." He cleaned the wounds, the stings sharp and clean. "You will eat everything on that tray. It is not a request." He finished bandaging my hands with a neat, efficient precision. Then he sat back, studying me. The firelight played across the sharp planes of his face. "Tomorrow," he said, "we begin." A flicker of fear returned. "Begin what?" "The process of deciding who Elara Vance is, now that she is no longer who Kieran Thorne said she was. Sleep. Your room will be ready. No one will harm you here. You are under my protection." He said it not as a comfort, but as a law of physics, as immutable as gravity. As I was led away by a silent attendant to a room that was indeed fit for a queen, with windows facing the promised peaks, one thought echoed in the hollow space left by the rejection. Kieran Thorne had rejected me to protect his perfect world. Rydian Vale had claimed me and thrown me into the heart of his mysterious one, and I had no idea which was more dangerous. The skyward suite was a beautiful cage. Sunlight, sharp and clear at this altitude, streamed through tall windows, illuminating a room of elegant, understated luxury. A bed bigger than my entire old apartment, a bathroom with a deep soaking tub, and a wardrobe already filled with clothes in my size. Soft pants, warm sweaters, sturdy boots. It was overwhelming. It felt like wearing a skin that wasn't mine. He took a deliberate step back, putting a chasm of polished marble between us. He drew himself up to his full, terrifying height, and his next words were spoken with the full, resonant weight of the Alpha Command, a power that bent the very air. "I, Kieran Thorne, Alpha King of the Silvermane Pack, reject you, Elara Vance, as my mate and future Luna." The bond, that beautiful, terrible, brand new tether, snapped. It wasn't a cut, it was an amputation. A scream tore from my wolf's throat inside my mind, echoed by my own silent agony. My knees buckled. The heavy silver tray slipped from my nerveless fingers and met the marble with a catastrophic, symphonic crash. Crystal exploded. Champagne like liquid gold sprayed across the floor and soaked my stockings. I collapsed amidst the shimmering wreckage, gasping, my hands slicing on broken glass as I tried to push myself up. The physical pain was nothing. The emptiness inside was everything. I was hollowed out. "I sever the tie," Kieran's voice continued, relentless. "You are nothing to me." From the crowd, a vision in crimson silk emerged. Seraphina Vale, daughter of a southern alpha, beautiful and vicious as a viper. She glided to Kieran's side, placing a possessive hand on his arm, her smile a knife aimed at my heart. "A wise and necessary choice, my king," she purred, her voice dripping with honeyed malice. "A creature like that would only poison your noble line." Kieran didn't shrug her off. He looked down at me, bleeding and broken in a puddle of champagne and my own shattered dreams. "Leave," he commanded, final as a judge's gavel. "Get out of my sight before I have you removed." I tried to stand. My legs failed. My blood, dark and red, swirled with the golden champagne. The humiliation was complete. I was a spectacle of ruin. I looked up, my vision blurring, searching the faces of the glittering crowd for a shred of mercy. I found only cold curiosity, disgust, or worse, amusement. "You heard your king," Seraphina sneered. "Someone take out the trash." Two of Kieran's guards stepped forward, their faces impassive. They reached for me. "Take your hands off her." The new voice did not shout. It did not need to. It was dark, quiet, and absolute. It came from the western entrance, a shadow detaching itself from the deeper darkness. Every head swiveled. Walking into the light was a man who moved like a silent storm. If Kieran Thorne was the day, this man was the commanding, dangerous night. He was dressed in simple dark clothes, his hair tousled, his posture deceptively relaxed, but his eyes, they were the color of aged amber, burning with a fierce, untamed intelligence. Alpha King Rydian Vale, of the Shadow Crest Pack. They called him the Ghost King. They said he was unhinged. They said he answered to no law but his own. He ignored everyone, his strange golden gaze fixed solely on me, kneeling in my devastation. He crossed the room, the crowd shrinking back from his path as if from a live wire. He crouched before me, heedless of the mess. For a long moment he just looked at me, taking in the tears, the blood, the trembling. Then he reached out and very carefully extracted a shard of glass from my palm. "Are you hurt?" he asked. His voice, up close, was softer than I expected, layered with a rough gentleness. I could only stare, shock muting the pain. "Rydian," Kieran's voice was a whip crack. "This is not your concern. She is a rogue, and I have rejected her. She is leaving." Rydian stood, drawing me up with him. His grip was firm, steadying. He finally turned his head to look at Kieran. "You rejected her," Rydian stated, as if clarifying a simple point of law. "You publicly and with great ceremony severed the mate bond." "Correct," Kieran spat. "She was never mine to claim." A slow, dangerous smile touched Rydian's lips. It wasn't kind. It was the smile of a chess player who has just seen his opponent's fatal mistake. "Good," said Rydian, the single word echoing. "Then you wouldn't mind if I do." Silence. A roaring, deafening silence that was louder than the crash of crystal. It swallowed the grand hall whole. 300 werewolves stared, breaths held, as Rydian Vale's words hung in the air. Kieran Thorne's face, already pale with a cold fury, darkened to the shade of a thundercloud. "Take her?" he echoed, his voice dangerously quiet. "You are making a fool of yourself, Vale, taking my leavings." "You keep calling her that," Rydian mused, that dangerous smile returning. "It makes me wonder what you're trying to convince yourself of." He offered me his arm, not his hand, a formal, deliberate gesture. "Shall we? The air in here has grown stale." The bond is supposed to be a sacred promise, a single, unbreakable thread woven by fate itself, connecting one soul perfectly to another. It is the law that tames the wild heart of a wolf, the divine compass in a world of chaos. We are taught to wait for it, to yearn for it, to believe it will be our salvation. But what do you do when the soul fate chose for you looks at you and sees nothing? What happens when your salvation becomes your public execution? My name is Alara Vance, and I was that invisible girl. The grand celestial gala shimmered with the cruelty meant for people like me to witness but never touch. It was a symphony of polished lies, marble floors reflecting 1,000 false smiles, chandeliers dripping with diamonds colder than the hearts beneath them. The air itself was thick with the scent of old money, ambition, and a sharp, metallic whisper of predator. I didn't belong here. I was a ghost in a starched black uniform, a server hired from the neutral city precisely because I knew how to vanish. Keep the champagne flowing near the eastern terrace, the floor manager hissed, his breath hot against my ear. The northern delegation is arriving. If Alpha King Kieran Thorne's glass is empty for even a second, don't bother coming back tomorrow. Kieran Thorne. The name was a winter storm given form, the Alpha King of the Silvermane Pack. His reputation was a blade, sharp, clean, and lethal. He was the pinnacle of pure bloodlines and ruthless power, a man carved from ice and arrogance. I nodded, my eyes fixed on the floor. Yes, sir. I lifted a heavy silver tray, its weight a familiar anchor, and began to glide through the crowd. It was a dance I knew well. Eyes down, scent suppressed, a breath held in the lungs. Be a shadow, be silent, survive. But as I neared the eastern archway, the music of the gala seemed to dim. The chatter faded into a muffled hum. A new pressure settled in the room, a static charge that made the hair on my arms stand on end. The massive doors swung inward, and he entered. Kieran Thorne moved like a conqueror surveying his land. He was devastating, tall, with shoulders that challenged the cut of his obsidian suit, hair the color of wheat under a harvest moon, swept back from a face that was all severe angles and command. His eyes, a glacial blue, swept the room, and every wolf instinctively straightened or lowered their gaze. Then a thrum started deep in my chest. It was a faint, discordance beat at first, a butterfly's wing against a window pane. Then it grew, pounding against my ribs like a war drum. My wolf, a gentle presence I had quieted for years, surged awake with a force that stole my breath. She didn't chase, she howled. Mate. The word wasn't a thought, it was a truth etched into my very bones. No, the silence plea was a scream inside my skull. Anyone but him, please, not him. I was a rogue, a girl with no pack, no name, and a past written in shadows. He was a king carved from daylight and legacy. This wasn't a gift, it was a death sentence. I tried to melt backward, to become one with the velvet drapes, but the pull was a physical chain, yanking me forward. My tray trembled, crystal flutes singing a nervous chime. Kieran Thorne stopped dead. His conversation with his beta ceased, his head tilted, a predator catching a strange scent on the wind. He frowned, those ice-blue eyes narrowing. He was searching, seeking the source of the fragrance cutting through the room's expensive perfumes, wild jasmine and midnight rain. My scent. Slowly, with a terrifying, deliberate grace, his gaze found me. Time stopped. The world dissolved into a tunnel containing only him and the devastating, horrifying connection snapping into place between us. It felt like lightning grounding itself in my soul, beautiful, terrifying, and utterly destructive. He began to walk toward me. The sea of silk and suits parted without a sound. A path cleared directly to where I stood, a waitress frozen in a spotlight of dread. Whispers rose like poisonous vines. Is that a servant? Why is the Alpha King looking at her? Look at his face. He's furious. I couldn't move. The mate bond held me in a vice grip of longing and terror. My legs were stone. My breath was ash. He stopped 3 feet away. His presence was a furnace, his scent of frost and pine overwhelming. He looked me up and down, a slow, thorough inspection that saw every frayed thread on my uniform, every callus on my hand, every hope I'd foolishly clung to. His lip curled, not in a smile, but in a snarl of pure, undiluted disdain. State your name. His voice was low, a rumble that vibrated in the hollow of my chest. Alara, I whispered. The word barely escaped. Alara Vance. And what pack do you hail from, Alara Vance? I swallowed, the truth a bitter pill to swallow. I have no pack, my lord. I am unattached. A rogue. The unspoken word hung in the air, more damning than any accusation. In this world, to be packless was to be less than nothing. It was to be suspect, flawed, abandoned. Kieran closed his eyes for a single, endless moment. A muscle ticked in his jaw. He was fighting it, fighting the primal biological imperative that roared I was his. When his eyes opened again, All trace of conflict was gone, replaced with a polar chill. Fate, he announced, his voice cutting through the silence, has made a grievous error. The words were a physical blow. I felt the blood drain from my face, a cold numbness spreading from my core. I didn't ask for this, I breathed, the defiance a tiny dying flame. Neither did I, he shot back, his tone merciless.